Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Pedig Beis, Halacha Aleph, and Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Chaf Aleph, and we left off on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amud. We're dedicating this class Le'iloi Nishmas Batya Bat Eliezer. Okay, so we left off on Daf Chaf Amud Beis. We had the statement of Shmuel that koil be'isha erva. Just to complete that, most Rishonim understand this to mean the singing voice. However, we mentioned yesterday that Ashba in Brachos that says that no, koil does not mean singing. What koil be'isha is an erva, it's about the content of the conversation, that if the conversation is a conversation that could lead to intimacy, then the problem isn't only the content, but then the coil of the woman itself becomes labeled as an erva. It sounds more literal. I want to mention one other rishon. Again, these are the minority opinions, which is the ritva. Whether it means singing, let's go with that. The ritva says koil be'isha erva only in the context of someone reciting the Shema or davening. In other words, while a person is saying the Shema, he's not allowed to hear a woman singing. Okay, this is the koil be'isha erva. Now, what we're going to have today on top, we should have finished the one-liner. We're going to have the source of that, but me'inyan le'inyan, which is very common the inyan of whether one may or may not recite brachos. One may not say Hashem's holy name while in the presence of an erva, whether one's own erva, whether another person's erva, as we learned. Not the same, but the same, that one may not say Hashem's holy name / one may not recite brachos in the presence of excrement. I know that in the Gemara, there's a lot of words about this. In Shulchan Aruch that we learned together, there's a lot about it. Many people might find it excessive. I want to say something. We are living in a generation where we have plumbing. It's hard to imagine, hard for me to imagine what life was like. I'm sure that people always venerated cleanliness. It's like natural. But they were unable, no way near, they were able to have the same level of nikius that brings tatara in those days. So it was common. Even to some degree, people who have the merit of having young siblings or children or grandchildren at the home, the ma'aseh mit the diapers, and even that, all over the place. In other words, there was b'mitzias a lot of this issue of there's excrement laying around. I can just go with kids, young children, and the question is, what's the cutoff point? What's the boundary in which we say, it's not respectful to say Hashem's name? And there, the Gemara here is very mekatzer, but we know the sugya well from the Bavli and again from Shulchan Aruch. There is an odor issue, there is a touching issue, and then there is an in the presence issue. Many times there's overlap, but each one in itself could be a problem. And some of that will be touched upon these few lines that we'll have before Halacha Beis. We're starting today. First of all, the first Halacha of the second chapter was so loaded, Amachaya, so many different topics. In Halacha Beis and the Mishnah that we will learn today, we're going to have two topics, both fascinating. Topic number one is, it really touches upon a bigger challenge in life, is that many times there's conflicting values. Everyone subscribes to values. What are your values is the kasha. But what happens when there is a scenario where there is a conflicting value? I'll tell you right now the scenario. On one hand, we are not supposed to avoid keeping a mitzvah. Chala is only obligatory when you have the minimum amount, and I'm going to go now to the words of the Tanoim, when you have 5 quarters. I love these expressions. 1 kav has 4 roiva hakavs. And when you have 5 roiva hakavs, a kav and a roiva, that is the 43.2. That is the 4 or 5 pounds of flour. If you have less than that, you're not mechuyev to separate challah. If one would to want to circumvent the obligation of separating challah, when you make dough, even if you're going to end up with that amount, all you need to do is don't make one dough with that amount. take the flour, make them into a little smaller batches. The expression in the Mishnah is only one kav. One kav is 4 roivas, not 5 roivas, 4 roivas. It doesn't mean 4. You can have 4.5, you can have 3, but that's the way the Mishnah expresses itself. You can do that, and you will not be obligated to separate challah. We know there is a value. We're not looking for a way out. If you remember me'ingen le'ingen, we learned so many mesechtas about trumas u'maisros, right? So when re'iyas penei habayis is needed, which is, as the Rambam clearly classifies, when you're not planning to merchandise your produce from the field to the market, when you plan to take it home, then in addition to Gemar Melach, I'm just making a quick chazara, there has to be the iyas penei habayis for the produce to become tevel midoy reiser. Remember that? And then midrabanan, there's shisha devarim. But let me go to the iyas penei habayis. It used to be that people purposefully took their produce into their home, dafke, to trigger the obligation, and then the mitzvah of resolving being mesak in your tevel. When people lowered their level, what did they do? They would bring the produce into their home, derech, gagois, through the roof, through skylights. Why? Because like that, they're not chayiv. That's not something of value. Okay, so that's one side. The other side is, and we touched upon this yesterday, there's nothing wrong making dough tameh. But there is. Why? Because from every dough that's chayiv and challah, one will separate challah. Even if the dough is tameh, you're chayiv to separate challah. You're chayiv to give it to the kohen. But the kohen cannot eat it. The kohen can only use it as fuel. And therefore, we make an effort. What did we learn yesterday? That if you have access to water, if it's in front of you until 4 mil, in other words, we want for us to make doughs betara. The conflict of values that we'll have in the first case in the Mishnah would be a person is unable to go to the mikveh. There's no mikveh available. By the way, there's a few options. If the person can be tummy, they can go to the mikveh. That's what I said yesterday. Just for the record, I mean, we're learning Rambam now. If a person is tamei meis, even if you have access to a mikveh, it's not going to help you. You need to have shivas nekiyim. You have to have the hazah, shlishi, ushvi. Another option would be, which is common, we find this, is that they would find a megabel. That means they would find a kneader that's tahor. It's not about the money. That person has to be the mitzias. So that will be another. You have an option of finding someone who's a kneader. And by the way, it's the same thing. If that person is within 4 mil, you have to go to him. Same concept that we learned yesterday. Beyond that, there's a tircha, you don't have to go. Okay, I don't have the megabel. So I have 2 options. Either make the dough and separate challah while the challah will be tamei from the beginning, or separate the dough into only kav pieces, and I'm going to circumvent the obligation to separate challah. At least there won't be challah betuma. That's called the conflict of values. Huh?
Could you owe challah? Like say, I'll give you...
No, you can't owe challah. Very good. You can't owe. In other words, you have to. It's a chefza. That this dough is called tevel because of challah, and you're chayv misa b'dei shamayim if you don't separate challah. When you're chayv midai raisa, which is not today. So that's going to be a machlokes tanoim. Which value trumps the other? Second topic of the Mishnah will be also a big topic. Tziruf. Tziruf means if I did not start out with the 5 kav, with the 5 roiva hakav, slicha, with the kav and a roiv. I didn't start out with that. But could I now, at some point, whether when we have the dough, whether it's already in the oven, whether it's already removed from the oven, is there a way, and there is a way, to halachically combine the various breads, even the breads, to the point where now you're chayiv to separate challah. I can tell you right now that because of our rush in baking matzahs, even though be'emes, the 18 minutes, if we're going to go with the 18 minutes, sometimes it can be less than that if the water is warm. But if it's 18 minutes, it's 18 minutes of the dough standing, of no one working with the dough. When you work with the dough, even when we walked out of Mitzrayim, when the dough was on our backs, that prevents the dough from becoming halachically chametz. But let's go with the 18 minutes. They want to do everything in 18 minutes. They don't even want to separate challah. Takes another moment. Now, when they bake challah, of course, we separate challah after it was baked. And how do they do that? By putting all of the matzah that was in the oven at the same time. We'll see this today. I'm saying this detail. Putting it into a keli. A keli doesn't mean a flatware. It means a receptacle that has walls, that has a clay kibble. That combines all of the breads together. If in the keli you have the minimum share, now you separate challah, which, by the way, would mean you're breaking a matzah. in the case of or if you have bread, because you don't have to separate. You have to separate one of 24, one of 48. Okay, I'm just putting it out there. So the second topic will be tziruf. Huh?
I'll have to be done in the finished state.
Challah, if it was not done in the ideal time, it has to be done as long as you halachically combined the final product, because most people don't have one bread that's 5 pounds of flour. That's humongous. Okay, that's going to be the second topic that we'll learn today. So the koil be'isha erva, guys, let's hit it inside. Matam in Yerushalmi means what's the source? That even only the voice, each Rishon, according to its opinion, as we said in the beginning, how do you know that it's called an erva? So it's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. V'hoya mikoil zenusa, the zenus of the voice, vatechna v'sa'aretz. Clear. Okay. Says the Gemara, me'inyan le'inyan, not saying, not taking, not articulating Hashem's name / making a bracha in the presence now of excrement. So Rafuna Amar, oimed hu adam al hatzoya, a person can even be standing on top of excrement, and he can be mispalo. Before I read the 1 second, look inside the Rashidilio, the top right line. Kegoin, what do you mean standing on top? So there's an odor issue. Remember, guys, there is a touching issue and there is a in the presence issue. In our case, there is no odor. If there would be an odor, you would not be able to daven. If you would be touching it, you would not be able to daven. So what does Rav Huna mean when he says you can stand on it? Says the Rashidilio, but Gemara is going to say this in a moment. Kegoin shahatzoya big guma ve'ein ragloi noigeya. There's a little hole in the ground. In it, there is tsoya. Person, maybe even to prevent the odor from coming into the home, to be able to daven, puts their foot on top of the hole. So not there is an odor, not you're touching, but it's within your daladamas. So here the Rav Huna is saying that since it's covered, there is no issue. And in the Gemara, ubelvat shelo yehei b'sorei negeya b'tsoya. Clearly, meaning that if one, I'm not talking about wearing shoes that l'cho'ed is a chatzitza. I'm talking about someone who's barefoot. If their besoroi would be touching the tsoya, even though it's covered, the fact that there is a touch, that in itself does not allow the person to daven / to take God's holy name. So from that we extrapolate that yashav aloikina chasad. If a person did not properly wipe himself, herself after they relieve themselves. Now, the Torah was not given to angels, so there is a certain point where it's okay. But if there is tsoya on the person's body, even though it's covered by the body, right? It's ba'oisa makayim, so it's covered. Now that Rav Huna is adding ubelvat shelo yehei negeya b'soroi, so same thing, even if there is no odor, and even though it's not seeable, it's covered, you won't be able to daven. Why not? Because it's touching your flesh. And says the Gemara, Amar Rav Mana, it's not only Rav Huna. Afal gav deloi Amar Rabbi Yosi hadam milsa. I'm going to add the word befedish. Befedish that what? That asur lihispalel. He said something that he didn't just finish the sentence, but he said it. Amar dekavasei de Rav Huna. He also said the same thing. Now, what did he say and what did he not say? You'll see. He said it. He just didn't finish the sentence. Amar, he said that oimed hu adam al gabi tzoyo mispalo. He also added the words mamish like Rav Huna ubelvat shelo yehei b'sorei negeya b'tzoya, but he should not be touching it. And then he himself added yashav v'loikinech. No, he didn't say the word asur. Rav Huna said the word asur. He didn't say that. But he said, Hadei b'soroi negeya b'tsoya. And again, there is a chiddush here. There is a chiddush here is because it's tsoya that came from the person's body. It's something that the person cleaned. You just didn't clean yourself properly. And it's covered. And again, we're speaking even in the scenario where there is no odor, or the person is by himself and he's got habituated to it. For him, there's no odor. For her, there's no odor. The negia bipsare in itself creates a problem.
But if he didn't clean himself properly, the undergarments do not create a chatzisa?
No, because the undergarment is not separating your flesh from the excrement. That's the problem. And even if it's over there in Ba'isa Makam where it goes out from, so it's covered by the body. That's the vard, the chiddush here. In other words, it's not enough for it to be covered.
Got it.
Now again, the Torah was not given to Malachim. Another thing, we're living today in a very clean world. Thank God. And also to say that by tzaddikim, b'chlal, they're very clean. Shockingly clean. I remember Rabbi Pikarsky, the Rosh Hashiva of 770. I never met that. This is like godly. Mamash, if when the Chazal say that if a Talmud Chacham has one stain on his garment, he's chayev misa. So cynically, that's bad to be cynical. I heard that if he only has one stain, he's chayev misa. Because why is he even aware of what's going on in his garments? But that's not big people. People, I don't know how it worked. They never put on deodorant. These are holy people. They didn't smell. They didn't smell. They were clean. If you're thinking about I'm thinking about my Rebbe's, not the Rebbe. They didn't have that, but they didn't have that also because they probably thought it was Hasidish to be completely removed from Olam Haza, and they had all these big coffee stains under talus cotton. I remember that, big ones. But they didn't notice. That's okay. They're not chayev misa. They were ruchniisdika people, but that's not the meaning. The meaning is that we also have to be clean begashmias. And today it's very doable, and today everyone has that. Everyone is there, and they should be there. Okay, so that's the end of halacha aleph, and now we're moving on to halacha beis. Like we mentioned in the intro, the two topics. First topic is always fascinating. When you have two conflicting values, which one will have to be upheld and which one will have to be sacrificed? So here's the case. Mi she'eno yochol lasois isosei betara. So that case we had yesterday. It can be because the person is tamei. It can be because the kalim are tameim. Okay? And let me just go because the Gemara is going to make a mention of the option. I mean, there are many options here. The normal option would be people were actually paid to knead those, to take over the bread making from a certain point from when it could become tamei. And these were people that kept themselves in a state of tara. The problem is that megabel, that dough kneader, was not available in close proximity. We learned yesterday, close proximity would mean milafana 4 mil, mila'achrav ad mil. There was a correction that I have to make to something that I said yesterday that I'll say in the Gemara. So says the Tanakama that what do you do? Ya'asena kabin. Again, one kav is 4 roiva. The chiyuv of chal is only when you have 5 roiva hakavs. Ya'asena kabin is the way the Mishnah words separate the flour prior to kneading it. Once it's kneaded together, you got a problem. What we said before, that if you plan to give it to different people, that's different. But here it's the same person. Lechatchila, make smaller doughs. Make sure that not a single dough should have the minimum amount. And you circumvented the obligation of challah. You did it for a reason. What's the reason? Va'al yasena betuma. We do not want to end up with challah that's tamei. By the way, nowadays, everyone is tamei. Everything is tamei. That's not in the case of the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva has the other value. Rabbi Akiva oimer, no, yasena betuma, va'al yasena kabin. And don't minimize challah that's tamei. And the way he expresses himself beautifully is by saying that kashem shu koida l'tohira, kachu koida l'tameya. What do we call challah tohira? Challah. What do we do when we separate challah? We take God's name. Same thing is with this challah tameya. It's called challah. You make a bracha. You get the mitzvah. Lezu koida challah b'shem and lezu koida challah b'shem. But if you make small doughs, each one only having kav, less than the shear, then ain't challah b'shem, then there's no challah. Better to have challah tameya than not to have challah at all. Now,
like what we do today is in line with Rabbi Akiva, because everyone's tamei and all women do large batches of dough and they separate challah.
The difference between now and in the times of the Mishnah, one may argue, is that since everything is tamei anyway, al derech the concept of tuma hutra b'tzibar, even though I'm not applying it here, No, it's today you can't. Everything is tummy. There is a point where since everything is tummy, we lost that. Anyways, here we didn't lose it. It's a one-off, maybe. I want to say the following. This is important, and it's also connected to the sugi we had in the last Mishnah about a woman unclothed separating challah because there isn't an erva, because her erva is covered, a woman, while she's sitting. There's another issue that I should have mentioned, and that is it's only covered because she's sitting. Isn't there a rule that a birchas ha-mitzvahs lechatchila at least should be made while standing? There is such a rule. So in the poskim, there is a discussion that differentiates between a mitzvah or a matir. A mitzvah would mean for us blowing the shofar. A mitzvah means for us putting on tefillin. A matir, the example of a matir would mean shchita. You know, there's no, not in the Beis HaMikdash. Here, basar taiva, there's no mitzvah. People are going to say Shabbos. There's no mitzvah to eat meat. No mitzvah. Elama, if I don't do shchita, I'm not allowed to eat meat. So the shchita is allowing me to eat something that otherwise I would not be allowed to eat. In many areas in halacha, a matir is not on the same level of a mitzvah. And many of the poskim argue from this halacha that that a woman can separate challah even while she's aruma, because she's sitting, is that when you're doing a matir, you can do it sitting, even birchas ha-mitzvahs. Al derech zeh, now it's a proper comparison when it comes to this l'choyda. That's this machlokes. You know, how are we to view the mitzvah of separating challah? If we view it ki'ilu only as a matir, so then we can circumvent a matir. If we're going to view it as a bona fide mitzvah, which is what Rabbi Akiva is shouting, how can you circumvent it? You got to do the mitzvah. Why are you looking for a way out? It's going to be betuma. You're not okay, so it's going to be betuma. But at least you did the mitzvah. You did the mitzvah betuma.
Why is it that size?
Why is it that size? Because we learned in the beginning of this Masechta that, if I'm not mistaken, one of the sources was from the Omer. All comes from there. The size of the Omer is Asiris or Eifa.
You go home.
Source. It doesn't answer the logic with that. Huh?
Someone eats 2 loaves of bread. You know, we have the ability to whatever.
Very good. So the Gabbai is making a good point. No one is arguing that you're chayiv to make more than what you need. First of all, there was poverty. Many people were unable to afford it. No one is saying that. Here, the Mishnah is speaking about a case where I have the 5 kav. I'm going to do something that I otherwise would not have done if the value would be, don't have tamei dikachala. Says Rabbi Akiva, there is no such value. If it's between toid and tamei, make it toid, if you could. But if that would mean that not having tamei means you circumvented the mitzvah by making 2 separate doughs. That's it. That's it. Beautiful. Okay. Now that I understand the hemshech and the Mishnah, now that we mentioned about when you don't have the right shear, you don't separate challah, well, is there a way for you to make them into the right shear? Now there is making. Now it's very pshita. If I have 2 separate doughs, each one is a kav, and I'm using the example of the Mishnah because I don't need to have 2 kavs, right? Aviv, I need to have 5 roivas, but we get that. Let's say I have 2 different kavs. Well, if I take the 2 doughs and I combine them, vadayam chayev, even though they were both already needed. It's not like now that they were needed, you can never combine them. We don't do that. It's not like Gemar Malacha. When the Meruach happened, when it was Biyad Hegdish, you'll never be Chayiv. Biyad, we don't do that over here. We also had when the outer crust of the bread happens. In other words, it begins when you need it, when you completed the kneading. But if at any point later there is a halachic combination, then you have to separate challah. So says the Mishnah like this: Ha'oisa yisase kabin. But now you began with less than the share. The nagu zebazeh. If they only touch each other, touching is not enough to combine. Still, they remain exempted from challah. Touching is not. It's a single entity. Doesn't work that way. Biting. The definition of biting would mean is that when you separate these 2 doughs that are touching, or in the oven, you separate the breads that were touching, it's not going to be a clean separation. One of them will drag with it a little piece of the other one. That's called biting. If they are biting into each other, biting makes it into a single entity. The reason why sometimes chavedim bite into each other is because they want to become ba'achdus. Just touching is nish genug. We gotta write down. We gotta have it out. Then we become better chavedim. And by the way, if it's done properly, it's taka that way. When everything is nice and wonderful, big deal. But when two friends can have a disagreement and they have the same respect afterwards and they have the same ahava, that's chavedim. That's the emes. Then they're one entity. Beautiful. Now, Rabbi Eliezer, let me tell you one thing. A lot of nuance in Rabbi Eliezer in the Gemara today. We'll get there today. It's a very easy Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer is not arguing with the Tanakama. That's the one thing I want to say. Rabbi Eliezer is not dissing that Neshicha creates one entity. It does. He's adding. Now, it's not clear what he's adding. The words are clear, but the Gemara will give you many different options. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, af. Also, that when you remove the breads and you put them in a single basket, I mentioned this by the matzah, and a basket dafka, a clay kibble, hasal mitztarfon lechala. Okay. In other words, they're already baked. I want to say one other nuance that we'll see in the Gemara implied. There are certain types of bread that even after it's baked, when you put them hot into the basket, they will bite into each other. And that will be the way some might have understood Rabbi Eliezer. But the pshat of Rabbi Eliezer is that either biting whether the dough's bit, whether they bit in the oven when they baked, or even if they didn't bite, simply putting them in a basket. It sounds straightforward. It's not straightforward. Let me say one thing that the Gemara is going to add almost according to all, that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, why is putting it in a basket enough? Because they were in the oven together. In other words, if you would have breads in different ovens, each one began with only a kav. No one had challah separated. And you put them into a sal, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, according to many, you won't be chayiv to separate challah. Or they were a type of dough that were ro'ui to bite into each other. This is bechlal not written. That we'll find in other tanoim, other braises. What do I mean by that? The Gemara is going to speak about Babylonian breads. This ichvesis, you guys are the bakers. There are certain types of bread that are pashut. The dough is such a metzias that the doughs don't bite into each other. There are other types, whether it's the circular, whether it's softer, I don't know. There are certain doughs that don't bite into each other. It was Rabbi Eliezer is saying that Tanakama says it has to actually bite into each other. Rabbi Eliezer says it doesn't have to bite. Biting, it's enough that it should be ra'ui to biting. And in addition, you have to put them in a keli after they're baked. So we're going to get to that in the Gemara.
Doesn't everybody agree that if you had a challah dough subject to challah, forgot to take it out, that afterwards you could put the challahs that were made into one.
So Danny's making very good. Say it again, 100%. If I had a dough that had the minimum shear and the chiyuv of challah was chal, then you have to separate challah. But you got a problem that if I forgot to do it and now I have separate breads, well, either from every bread separate challah or do the tziruf, which is what we do today. You put them in a keli, or by the way, in Shulchan Aruch you can cover them. It's like inversed keli. But there's a tziruf that has to happen, and then from one you separate the challah. Our Mishnah is not exactly the same case, because our Mishnah is speaking about where there was never a chalois chiyuv challah because you never had the minimum share. But are they going to combine either neshicha or even something else, which again, it sounds straightforward. The Gemara adds so many details in it that it's not that straightforward. But we're going back to the first case of the Mishnah, and I want to make a correction. When I said yesterday 4 mil, I kept on saying up until 4 mil, up until 4 mil. Actually, that's the Gemara's question here. Is it ad v'ad b'chlal, ad v'lo yad b'chlal? Are you chayiv if it's exactly 4 mil? Does it mean you are exempt? It's 4 mil. Or no, you're only exempted whether to find a mikvah for yourself, whether to find a kelim mikvah, if it were to help, whether it is to find a kneader, if it's more than 4 mil. The Gemara didn't know that. So that's the question. What's the amount? Do we say pochus ma'arbas mil yasenu b'tara? That only if the solution of bringing tahara is within 4 mil, less than 4 mil, you're chayiv, which is what I said yesterday, which is going to be incorrect. That won't be the maskana. Arbas mil yaseno kabin. Once it's 4 mil or more, And we're talking, guys, we're not talking about Rabbi Akiva. We're talking about Shitas Tanakama. So then you have no solution. Might as well make it Kabin. Or E means Oi, Arbas Mil, even if it's exactly 4 mil, you're still chayiv, even according to the Tanakama, to go exert yourself, go to the mikvah, go find the megabel, and make it bitara. It's only when it's more than 4 mil does the Tanakama, not Rabbi Akiva, say, Yaseno Kabin. 4 mil is up until 4 mil. Now, what I did say correct yesterday is that if you have to go Mala'achrov or Mala'achoirov, there it's ad mil. If it's a mil, you don't have to go backwards. But in front, the Gemara here is not clear, and the Gemara resolves it. It's not, yes.
Wait, what if like you're this tummy don't make and you're just like in one place? What would be considered fronting that?
One more time.
What if you're this tummy don't make and you're just like living in your house? What would be considered fronting that?
No, the tummy dough maker cannot make dough. What happens if there's a tahar dough maker? If I'm in my house, any direction is called back, because if the only reason why I'm going is in order to do it betara, it's called back. The going front is because since I'm going anyways, even though my plan was to do that tomorrow, I'll do it today. Okay, so
Your house is less than 1, then you go back.
Only in my house when it's less than 1 do I have to go, because anywhere I'm going, why am I going?
Didn't you make it time?
No. So it must be that it's not Tameh yet. The simplest solution would be, one second, is that the grain never became Mukhshir. It's only going to become susceptible when you need it. Prior to needing, I can be Tameh Mace.
We're talking about this is the water and flour now.
Half flour, very good. And now I have to knead it.
So it's not a dough.
So now the solution would be, according to the Tanakama, what is he saying? Separate the flour into 4 roivas piles and knead it. Okay, so now what's the answer? Nishmeina min ado. I'll know it from that which Rabbi Barva says, Kigoin Kesrin. Now, whether this is what's it called in today? Casaria. Whether the Gemara's Casaria is the Casaria of today, I don't know. But just to know that this Kesrin was exactly 4 mil. And what he's saying, can go in case it, and what he's saying, but the diuk is that if I am in one edge of the city, no matter where, even if I'm in one edge, I'm tamei. And the solution of making it pitaras in the other edge, even according to the Tanakama, I can't make it kabin. I got to do it. So he's trying. He makes it clear from this using kesodin as a mashal that it's only if it's more than 4 mil.
4 is included.
4 is included. Very good. Thank you. Daf chafalaf amid beis. Now, the Gemara says, Vekesrin lav arbas milani. Isn't it exactly? I'm saying this because today's Kesaria, guys, 4 mil are 2 or 3 miles. How big is today's Kesarin? The real estate. The bigger, the better. Probably the most expensive homes in Israel. Gavaldik. Every Jew here should have a house there. You don't have to live there. Just have a house there. It's good. That's a good investment.
Rabbi,
Yes.
quick, you said before that when you leave the house, 1 mil. So
Less than 1 mil.
Right. So the case of what we just said about Kesaria, if I leave the house, I still have to travel Arba mil?
Vlad just refuted me. Yeah, very good. He was actually, if I understand correctly, Rabbi Barva was speaking about a person that's in Kesarin that are chayiv to go to any edge of the city, even if from edge to edge, to make it betaro. But we're not talking about a traveler. You're saying good, Vlad.
This is based by walking, or is this
Based by walking. I spoke about this yesterday.
Then maybe it would be 4 mil.
Then maybe 4 mil. Yeah, I don't know the logic behind it, but yeah. So Aviv, I stand corrected. No, the example that he gave was that if you are in Kesarim, and if there is an option of finding a megabel, a kneader who's tahar, you got to go find him, even according to the Tanakama. And again, vekesarim lav abbas milan he hado amra abbas milan yaseno betaro. Only when it's yoiser ma'ar bas milan, then does the Tanakama, again, I'm hacking the Tanakama. Rabbi Akiva says you never separate it. Then yaseno kabin, says the Gemara, Rav Ami and Amoira. He paskind like Rabbi Akiva, he had this large dough. The option would have been to make many, many small doughs, right? He didn't do that. He paskin, no, that don't split into kaf portions, leave it big, and you'll make it paskin like Rabbi Akiva. Now, v'haloi ein sham arbas milan. What did we just say right now? And thank you, Vlad. That was a good correction. That the whole machloikis is if you have to go more than 4 mil. If you have to go more than 4 mil, yeah, then you have a machloikis. If you don't have to go, if it's 4 mil or less, not you get to make kabin, not you get to make it betuma. You got to resolve it. So they were wondering, in the case of Kfar Shammai, v'haloi ein shamar bas milin, the whole village doesn't have 4 mil, and it's unacceptable that there wasn't a single tahara solution in the whole Kfar Shammai. For sure, there was a megabel that was tahar. That's a problem. And the Gemara gives a Gavaldika answer. I'm going to go learn this the way the Gemara learns this, which is very important. Mikiven de nahara mafsik, since that in Kfar Shammai there was a river. You're right. So someone just asked this today, but I spoke about this yesterday, about Rav Moshe, about the car. In other words, it's not 4 mil. It's the tircha of going 4 mil. In a case where the city is smaller than 4 mil, but to get to the other side of the river is where you have a person who started. You have to cross the river. That type of tircha is like going more than 4 mil. Kimi sheyesham arbas mil. Look inside the top gra, bir hagra, kiven denaro mafsik v'yesh toirach la'avoy kamoy arba milin v'asul ashmeinim. So what do we see? The lav dafka arba milin. This is the source of this question with the car, because you can't use arba milin when you have a car. You don't have the tircha. Very good. Ella im yesh eza tircha lahaloisa legabel kegoin leilach arba milim. Then oz muter lasoise betuma. That's according to Rabbi Akiva. No, not only is it mutter, make it betuma, don't make it into those. Now, says the Gemara that, just to know, the word masnisa is normally an opener when we're quoting a Tana. Here, masnisa is in reference to Rav Ami. It just shows how much reverence they had to Rav Ami. That the Gemara is asking, isn't the masnisa only like Rabbi Akiva? What's the problem with that? The machlokes in our Mishnah is between the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva. They should have passed like the majority opinion. The Rabbi Akiva was the one that said Yasenu betuma, which is what he says, make it betuma. Va'al Yasenu kaben, meaning, why did Rav Ami only side with Rabbi Akiva? The halacha should be like the Chachamim. The Gemara gives a gavaldic answer. Even Rabbi Akiva, even the Chachamim, everyone in the Mishnah will be in agreement a lot more than they will be in disagreement. And let's listen to this. Similar to the way the Gra explained that if you have a nohar that's mafsik, there's a tircha. Isa gedoyla haisa, noyach hoyeloi lahalech kama, v'loi la'asoy kaben. Same idea. Look inside the Gra, 3 lines from the bottom. Perush, the case of Rav Ami was, it was a huge dough. If he were to have to separate the dough or the flour to only have kabin, it wasn't he had 5 pounds, you make it into 2. Mislami had 50 pounds. He would have to make it into 12, 11. That is such a big tircha that no one would be mechayiv him to do it. There is a point where everyone will agree that you make it betuma. Everyone will agree with that. How great is that? And one final observation regarding this sugya, and that is l'cho'era. The Gemara is asking now, mechalfa shitasi de Rabbi Akiva. We're going to have a Mishnah later. The Mishnah is going to speak about a person who made a kav for roiva dough, and they separated challah. Sure, this happens nowadays. And the question is, okay, they weren't chayiv, but if they separated challah, is it challah, holy, like truma, or is it not challah? So Rabbi Akiva is the one that says it's challah. The Chachamim are the ones that say it's not challah. This seems to contradict the Mishnah. Tamon, who oimer, over there in the Mishnah, in our pagination, it's on Daf Lamed Tes. Rabbi Akiva says that noitel mikav chala. But over here, the understanding of the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva is saying that make it tamei, and not what? Don't make small doughs. Shkoyach. Yeah, I'll tell you why. Not because one value trumped the other. Because according to Rabbi Akiva, even if you would make it into small doughs, you can still separate challah. So the Gemara says, yeah, you could separate challah, but you don't have to separate challah. What's understanding lechatchila was that according to Rabbi Akiva, no matter what size, you always have to separate challah. If that's the case, Rabbi Akiva doesn't belong in our Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva, our Mishnah is speaking about competing values. If you understand Rabbi Akiva to be saying that no matter how little it is, you have to separate challah anyways, then of course Rabbi Akiva says make it betuma. But anyways, it's going to be tamei. So the Gemara answers no. Over there, the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Tes is that you're not chayiv to separate challah if you have less than the 5 roivas. Eloma lisha aver means after post facto. If you did it, it's challah. The Chachamim saying the Mishnah, no, it's not. Over here, we're speaking about lechatchila. Lechatchila, you don't have to separate challah from small doughs, which is why bein to the Tanakama, bein la Rabbi Akiva, there could be a solution of separating the flour into small kav doughs. There could be such a solution. It would resolve.
Today that women do where they separate challah, but they don't make a bracha, like somewhere
Between 2.5 and 5 pounds. That's because we have a suffix that's because we have a suffix of shiurim. We don't know how to put into our pounds the 5 roivas.
It sounds like we're saying you don't separate.
Rabbi Akiva is saying that even if you made less than 2.5 pounds, if you separated challah, you it's actually challah.
Why would everybody do that?
No, because you don't have to. You don't have to do that. I would prefer doing something that I have to do. If the idea is not to circumvent myself from doing a mitzvah, gadol mitzvah va'oisem. That's why. Okay. Now tziruf. Let's go. Let's finish this. It's very simple. So again, the Mishnah sounds so simple that the Tanakama says nishicha, that Rabbi Eliezer agrees to. That is mitzaref. That combines. Rabbi Eliezer is adding even if it was put in a sal. So hold on, nishtazoi. So Rabbi Yoina, in the name of Rabbi Chia, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, and the same was said by Rabbi Yosi, in the name of Rav Imi, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. That even according to Rabbi Eliezer, these are shocking words. Rabbi Eliezer says af. Af means l'chayt is being more lenient. Even if what? Even if they didn't bite. No. Ve'hein shenoshku. So the Marav Fulda makes a big clarification. Only the Marav, there's a big machlokes how to learn this b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. That Rabbi Eliezer says af. Af means even if it wasn't neshicha. When Rabbi Yechanan is saying ve'hem shenashchu, it means, look inside the Marav Fulda, one line under the Gemara, that if it was ra'ui to bite into each other. In other words, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, if it's a type of dough that even when you touch them together, they don't bite into each other, even if you put them into a basket later, they will not be combined.
You bake it like a muffin tray. Touch each other anyway.
No.
Make it separate.
No, Shlem is speaking about that the keli does not allow them to touch. That is ro'ui. That means if not for the separation of the keli, they could have bitten into each other. Only there did Rabbi Eliezer say, there was no neshicha, but if you put them in the sal, it combines them. But even according to Rabbi Eliezer, if it's a type of dough, the Gemara is going to speak about Babylonian bread versus I don't know what bread. If it's another type of bread, if it's not shayich neshicha, then even according to Rabbi Eliezer, even putting it in a basket won't combine it. All your readings. Now, says the Gemara, there are other tanoim involved. Is tanoi tanei that hasal mitzaref ein atano mitzaref? There's a b'chalal kasha. There's so many ways of learning it. My question is like this. Why do you b'chalal need to have tziruf of the sal? Why doesn't the oven combine it? So people will understand that when does Rabbi Eliezer say that hasal mitzaref? If you didn't have them all in the same oven, so there wasn't tziruf. So says this Tana, no. That even in the case where they were all in the same oven, like I'll go back to my matzahs, the oven cannot combine. Why? Because the oven is mechuber lekarka. That's the way we're going to learn. You need to have dafka keli, not something that's karka. The istanoi tane, the opposite. Now this opposite is a new Tana. It's not Rabbi Eliezer. That only the tanur can combine, let's add Rabbi Yechanan. It's ro'ui to bite. You know where doughs bite into each other? In two places. Either when they are dough, or in the oven, even if in the oven when they grow, it happens many times by us. Now that they grew, so at least there's a ro'ui as dough, but after it's fully made into bread, they'll never bite into each other. No, it's this time, the Nutai holds that Neshicha is so essential, I'll give in, ro'ui is enough. But when it's not even ro'ui, only the Tanur is mitzdarif. He disagreeing with Rabbi Eliezer. Yes, clearly. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that IT say mid the chalfai. I learned chilfa and ilfa are the same. Ilfa is like Rav. He's mamash from the general. Remember Ilfa with the giant. That noshchu, if they actually had neshicha, he holds. I mean, that's the bottom line. Halacha kan v'kan mitzaref. Loy noshchu kan v'kan einoy mitzaref. In other words, he's paskening, you know what you need? One thing. You know what that is? Neshicha. Daf chav beis, masnisa, there are other braisas that make it clear, kegoin ilan rifta the bavel. Kegoin ilan rifta the bavel would mean that when we are entertaining Rabbi Eliezer, this is what we quoted before, who holds that you don't need neshicha. All you need is sal. Or according to this new Tana, all you need is the oven. Has to be together in the oven. All of that is bamed dvarim amurim. If it was ro'ui, kol ro'ui lebila. What type of doughs are biteable doughs? The types of loaves that were made in Bavel versus the loaves that were made in Yerushalmi, that they were made in such a way that they never bit into each other. I'm curious today when you have lechem mishnah, right? Sometimes you buy these challahs that are, what's it called? They're attached.
But when you touch it, is that considered a whole loaf, or is it not called a whole? When you break it off.
And I want to know when you break it off. In other words, if it's considered one loaf, then if I break it, I don't have a shlema. So hold on a second. So this, I think.
Are you talking about pull apart challah?
Huh?
Are you talking about pull apart challah?
I think so. Yeah, yes. You know, you buy they come six. But
Yeah,
here
but
we're
you
adding
pull them
another
apart.
nuance that I don't believe that in Yerushalmi they never bit at all.
Bagels, the Yerushalmi bagels.
They don't bite. I'm gonna say they don't bite each other. I was thinking because when I was learning, how can it be they don't bite? It means they only bite a little because by these bilkalach, they don't bite into the challah. They bite into just the edge. That's what I was thinking. That's not called biting. But Shlomo is saying that actually today in Yerushalayim they taka don't bite. Shali, shalach. All right, I apologize. I have this thing about Yerushalmis. My Rebbe's were Yerushalmis. I'm chayder.